All right, Lord Danavan Hylton back and welcoming you to Insight into Insight, where we get a chance to review a video that involves me in it, where I'm giving some kind of insight. We watch the video and we give insight to that video that we watched. Today's case, we're talking about the thought of the day, where I get a chance to discuss just an experience that I've gone through to be able to make sure that we are all aware of the best steps to move forward to be successful traditionally in business. And so for those that don't know, I have an opportunity to connect with public and private brands to introduce them to urban communities for a number of different reasons, particularly either to increase their customer base or to increase their presence in the community. And so my work basically consists of dealing with people, dealing with different perspectives, and having emotional intelligence and good soft skills training as well. So I should have some links there if you want to connect as far as my services, or if you're a brand that needs some advising, particularly on how to capture a new audience base in urban areas, you can reach out as well. And so today we're going to talk about what is your long-term vision? Say it again. What is your long-term vision? And I want to respectfully create this video for community organizers and community activists, because I appreciate their passion and I understand where they're coming from. But at the same time, I want to deliver a message that in your line of work, respectfully, everything dealing with business, government, and the community is connected. And it's important for us as community organizers and activists, or a community organizer and activist, to have maturity. And we're gonna go ahead and break this down real quick as we can. And the title, what is your long-term vision? I'll make sure I put in the link. I did a previous insight into insight, and I believe the title was without a vision, you will perish. Without a vision, your idea or your strategy will perish. I believe that's what it was. I'll put the link there. And ultimately, that discussed not having a vision. And if you don't have a vision, traditionally, without a vision or direction, you're going to make choices that may end up causing more challenges than success. And so, again, that vision is so important. And I just want to reiterate, we talked about what will happen if you don't have a vision, not perish like with your life, but your idea or your initiative may not be all that it's supposed to be. But in this case, we're going to talk about what is your long-term vision? And if you have a long-term vision, how do you put yourself in a position to be sustainable, even through your passion and drive to get things done for your community? And so ultimately what this board is talking about is business. And in my book, business consists of an entrepreneur, but also includes an employee, someone working that's taking care of their business. We also have community, and I put under community education, because I do feel on the community side, education is key in order to put yourself and those around you in the best position to get things done. We also have the government. And when I think of the government, we're definitely talking tax dollars and political parties at the minimum, respectfully. And then we have maturity, which I believe is you, myself as the individual, which requires diplomacy, kindness, patience, and privacy. So let's break this down. You have an organization or initiative that you're passionate about. And in this case, I'm particularly talking to, respectfully, those organizers and activists that focus on low income, poverty areas, traditionally, respectfully, when there's some higher crime, and they're really looking to continue to bring positive results to that environment, not only for the children but for the families and adults. And so going through that process, and sometimes, a lot of times, organizers and activists come from that environment, and so they know firsthand the challenges that are experienced. They know firsthand some of the resources that are lacking by choice or by force, and that can make someone feel a certain way, And so when they come in, they're ready to get the job done. But in that, I want us to keep in mind that there are really two primary components that we have to focus on. The two components that I think you may have an idea on is yourself. It's very important to know yourself. It's very important to know, your limitations, your strengths, and your weaknesses. And that just basically deals with maturity. I wouldn't recommend anyone going out and advocating if they're not in the best position to be diplomatic. I have the word diplomacy here. If you're not in a position or in the mindset to be a diplomat or an ambassador for your initiative, for your community, especially with the government and businesses, it's going to make what you're looking to do more challenging, especially if you need government assistance or if you need business assistance. Unless you're in when I say assistance, it really boils down to, respectfully, a lot of times the funding. Because like Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad Poor Dad, I believe it was him, or somebody said, funding to a business is like blood to the body. You have to have it in order for that body or that business to flow, as far as blood and funding. And so a lot of times, organizers and activists start a nonprofit organization, and they're usually looking for dollars from the government. And they're looking for dollars from the business sector. And if that's that's why the diplomacy is so important, because you can't burn bridges intentionally, and you always want to put yourself in a position to receive resources. And the funny thing about this is you never know who's connected to who. And so if you're not thinking as far as your long-term vision, then sometimes your short-term experiences can put you in a position that makes your vision harder to achieve. And that's really our doing, simply because we were not being diplomatic or an ambassador. I always like to think of it as foreign relations, international relations. Foreign relations being you have an ambassador, if you will. Let's give the USA for an example. The United States of America has an area called Washington, D.C., where a lot of the federal government activities are done. But in Washington, D.C., or around that area, there are buildings and institutions that are housed by other countries or other government representatives of countries. So you might have the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I'm going to shout them out because I was able to get to their embassy in Washington, D.C. You have France, and you have all these other countries where those countries actually appoint through their president or their prime minister or their house, if you will, House of Lords, or their Congress, whatever you want to call it. They have individuals that they appoint from their country to go to the United States and to have a building or location where individuals that now reside in America, if I'm not speaking out of ignorance, if they needed to go to their country or former country for any reason, that access is there. And a lot of times those ambassadors will work directly with, the United States government. And so if the ambassador is saying things that is off, it could start a challenge. So an ambassador is very wise with their words, because they're not only representing their country overseas or wherever their country is located, but they're also looking to build a working relationship with the United States government and vice versa. So whenever you're in someone else's home, especially, you want to make sure that, one, you respect their home, honor their home, but two, you also want to put yourself in a position where you're not creating more challenges to where those two entities, sources, brands, or parties, or countries cannot work together. So diplomacy on a smaller scale, on a more micro scale, is no different. You're representing, and you might look at it as a foreign area, which is your location, your community, your neighborhood, because you feel like it may have been abandoned, forgotten. So you represent that area, and now you're putting yourself in a position to connect with foreign agencies, if you will, which would be the government, business, if you will, because traditionally you have the community already there. They're already bought in, they're assisting you, they're volunteering, dedicating their time or their talent or finances, whatever that looks like. But at the same time, to get to the next level, and at the same time, my statements might be seen as weak-minded or a pushover, but from my experience, I've always seen when you're able to at least be able to build tolerable relationships, you're able to get things that you need, from an area that you're not from or for a side that you're not with. You're able to get those resources. I'll give you an example. So for example, if you're running for office and you're saying, oh, I'm gonna make this change, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. That sounds great. But at the same time, please know as an elected official, you're gonna be in the chamber with other elected officials that represent their district or their area. And so usually in a vote, it's not just your vote. It's gonna be a vote from other elected officials that represent their district or their area. It could be city or state, countries, it doesn't matter, wherever you are. But so a lot of times, especially as an elected official, you have to be able to work with other elected officials or work with other parties so that you're able to get the votes that you need when you have stuff done and stuff that you are putting on the table to be voted on, and vice versa. And so that's why I have a lot of compassion and patience, if you will, for elected officials, because there's a lot of moving parts in that experience that really, if you're not there, we as constituents or residents may not really understand. And so it's the same thing with diplomacy. You need things done from other people or other brands, and so therefore you have to find a win-win deal or working relationship with those brands or those peoples to get it done, because you need them technically. If you're coming to them, they don't need you. And they may need you, but they may not tell you that. Therefore, they want to get the best leverage from you to get something done or the most out of you. This is diplomacy. This is politics. Not necessarily the politics or political realm that we're talking about on traditional scale, but just dealing with people, dealing with, sources and brands, diplomacy. And so again, it boils down to you knowing yourself. If you're not able to be a diplomat, or you can be an ambassador, but if you can't be a diplomat for the area or brand that you represent in a way that is going to at least get the attention and honor and at least the working relationship between these two brands or sectors, it's going to make what you're doing more challenging, unless the funding that you're getting is from individual people that are sustaining what you're doing. And usually with individual peoples, you might be able to say a little more, do a little more, because again, it's the people that are donating the money. However they're getting the money, they're donating it to you, But if you get to a point where you're getting money from businesses or you're getting money from government, you have to be a diplomat, because guess what? They could not only stop the funding, but they can also keep the funding coming in the future. Well, why? Because everybody is connected to everybody. And you'll know that as you continue to get out into the world of building and managing relationships. So for example, the government, respectfully, each living area or each neighborhood, each city, each state, each country has a body of individuals that manage the day-to-day operation on that land that consists of business and communities. So really, everywhere that we reside, that I know of at the minimum to some degree, especially in the US, there's governments. And those governments are looking to, well, the idea of government is looking to make life easier for not only communities, but also businesses. So if you feel that you as an individual can help your community by dissing the government, I'm not anything. You can do what you want, but do you feel that you're going to get what you need out of them if you're constantly bad-mouthing them? And you probably have a good reason to bad-mouth them. But that'll bring us down to the bottom point of maturity, which is privacy. Meaning, if there's ever any challenges that you're having, you want to do it in a private setting. The only time you want to bring in the media or bring in that outside, external, is to really get the word out, to really push a message. But a lot of times, the messaging and the word to get out is the last thing that needs to happen. Nothing needs to be talked about publicly until things are taken care of privately. So if you're having a challenge with any of these sectors up here, you want to make sure that if you can schedule a private conversation. Now, a private conversation may not always be possible. They might actually legitimately say, hey, I don't want to deal with you. And that could be because of past experiences with similar individuals or similar brands. But at the same time, you have to plant seeds at the minimum based upon your maturity to make someone think. And again, this is where grace comes in. You guys always know I'm a spiritual man. I do believe in the physical as well as the spiritual realms. So if you're through the best grace you can, if you are abiding by the spiritual laws based upon your faith, if you're abiding by those spiritual laws, usually things should go and work with you. That doesn't work for you. That doesn't mean that there's not going to be any challenges. It just means that your steps are ordered, if you will. You are placed in a position at a time such as this for a situation such as this. There is no coincidence. But at the same time, you have to have that maturity. So what I'm saying is, if you have a long-term vision, and if you see a challenge, not only do you need to use diplomacy and be a diplomat, you also want to do it in a private setting. So that way you're not putting anybody on the spot, you're not embarrassing anybody. All parties can speak their truth and hash it out to be able to come up with some type of solution to be able to move forward. And from the diplomacy into a private conversation, you also want to focus on being kind in your conversation. Easier said than done. I may not have always been kind. In my experiences, I'll give you an example. I had took on a task where my task did not sit well with the community residents. Be it my task was right or wrong, that's not the point. I pray all things that I do is within moral, ethical grounds. But in this case, the task that was completed by me, the community residents, it didn't sit well with them. So therefore, I heard their opinions in person, over the phone, online, through social media, and through third parties because they were talking behind my back. But even during those times, especially on social media, where people were saying everything to me in the book, I always responded with a please and thank you and kind words. I appreciate your perspective. I appreciate, where you're coming from. I definitely understand. I thank you for your patience. Patience is actually our third point in our maturity box. So not only do we have to use kindness, but we also have to have patience in ourselves as well as in others. That's how you maximize your diplomacy. That's how you become mature. Easier said than done. But more importantly, through those experiences, I had a few people come to me during the heat of that moment. Over time, through days of that moment, they were saying, Donovan, hey, I saw, these people getting on you, but I appreciate, and they didn't agree with me either. But they still came to me and told me, I appreciate, how you're handling the situation. I appreciate how you're being respectful and talking to everybody, which meant a lot for me because I was going through that experience in my line of work for the first time. And, I'm more polished now, more experienced, more seasoned. But at the same time, my line of work is building relationships with community leaders, with community brands and organizations, and with neighbors, if you will. And so anytime, you're not able to see eye to eye, that's not usually a good thing, especially when I really have a heart for people that I serve. And so for them to see that, hey, we're on the same page and they let me know that, That was an eye-opener, but more importantly, the way that I handled it was very professional and mature, because years down the line, those same people that were giving me challenges, we're working together on other capacities. I'm working with people that are within their circle, and even though I'm not working with that individual that gave me the hard time, I'm working with their closest people in their circle. And imagine if I did not conduct myself in a professional manner, and now time has gone and I'm working with their network, and I didn't know that, we were both connected to some degree to the person that was giving me a hard time. Imagine if I get, the people online or in my face gave me a hard time, and I found out that I'm working with their network. That person will say, oh, Donovan is like this and he does that. Don't work with him. Then that's the end of it. Word of mouth, testimonials count for a lot, and so it's very important, because you never know who you're going to connect with either now or in the future. And that's why we're talking about what is your long-term vision. Because if your long-term vision, let's say, for example, is to help children, then that means that any challenge that you're going through cannot put you in a position that's going to make you helping children harder. The biggest picture is that end goal. And that's why it's important for you to know your long-term vision, because you have short-term visions, you have long-term visions. And short-term visions happen regularly, and they're ups and downs. But each short-term vision will end up being a part of the long-term process. But it's still the same vision, you just haven't been able to see it as clearly because you're not taking those steps at that time to get closer to see it. You just haven't made those steps yet for whatever reason. And so I just want us to know, as community organizers, community activists, it's very important for us to exercise maturity through diplomacy, through kindness, through patience, and through privacy, in order for you to build working relationships with these two sectors, the business sector and the government sector. The government sector, one, because especially if you're looking for funding, government sector deals with tax dollars. So anytime you take money from the government, you're basically taking money from your neighbor or anybody else that lives within that district for them to say, hey, look, that's my hard-earned money. And I have my tax dollars paying these government workers or elected officials to do a job that benefits me and my family and my neighbors. So therefore, as a resident, I have a say, because you're getting money from the government. Guess what? Where do you think the money from the government comes from? From us working as an entrepreneur or us serving as an employee. So they're taking, an entrepreneur and employees taking their money. The government gets a piece of that through taxes. The government says, hey, we're going to help fund community situations. You're the head of, or the decision maker for your community. All that is connected. And so also when it comes to the government, outside of tax dollars, you're dealing with political parties as well. And I try to stay out of politics, but at the same time, respectfully, there are predominant, there's predominant parties or bigger parties than, there's different parties, but there's some that are bigger than others, put it like that. And so I think we could think of two, if you think real hard, you could think of two political parties that may come to your mind. And I want to say there's independent parties or the independents, and there's other parties, but there's two large ones that come to mind that you may think of. And those two large ones, respectfully, don't always see eye to eye. And if you respectfully burn a bridge with either one of those parties, again, you're going to alienate yourself, maybe to just to one party, or you're going to alienate yourself in the long run, because at the end of the day, respectfully, these party individuals still talk to each other. Again, we just talked about earlier how once you're elected official, you got to go into a chamber and vote with X amount of other people that might be of a different political party. But guess what? If you're still a human being and you care about humans, you're still going to build a relationship with that person. You're still going to want to, hopefully pray that their family is okay, their loved ones are okay, their friends are okay. And as you go through that political process and you're both elected officials, over time, you're going to get to meet their family. You're going to get to meet their friends. and vice versa. And if you're focused on, your country, your city, your state, your county, you're going to find a way. If you're integral in what you do, you're going to find a way to at least build somewhat of a tolerable relationship with that individual. And relationships can be so strong eventually that behind the scenes, parties could, talk with each other and kind of make group decisions on who to work with, who not to work with. And so my point is, I just want you to decrease the risk of not being able to reach your goal. And so these 2 points, tax dollars and political parties under government, should require you to think about exercising maturity at all times. Now, when it comes to businesses, it's a little different because it's the private sector. It's not dealing with the public because you're dealing with other people's money. In the private sector, these entrepreneurs raise their money privately outside of the government's help traditionally, and they have more of a say on what they can do with their money. But at the same time, they still have to be respectful of society, their customer base, their prospective customer base as well, if they're looking to continue to have a strong public image. So even though it's public sector, in business there's public image because you're still dealing with people. And so I'll use an example. I think the terminology right now they're talking about is cancel culture. And that's where the initiative or the idea is, if some brand does something that doesn't sit well with community residents are saying, hey, let's cancel or not financially support and do business with these companies. And so companies now, especially with technology and communication and media and everything being so accessible, businesses have to be more wise on what they say and do, because it's easier now for people to connect with one another and move on one accord. And they don't want to lose money, So again, in this case, I just want us to, and hopefully this makes sense, I want us all to be aware that, especially for community organizers and activists, it's not just you and your community. It's not just you and your initiative, because indirectly, your work is going to spill into the private sector as well as in the public sector, dealing with businesses and government. And you want to have, as much as you can, support from these individuals. So if there are challenges that you're going through, you want to be able to use diplomacy to have a private conversation to find out and ask, hey, how can we build a working relationship? What does that look like to you? And they're going to let you know. And if it's something that does not sit well with you or is not a good fit for you, you definitely still want to use kindness and be patient while they're speaking and thank them for their time. And just let them know, right now, based upon what you're saying, definitely not a good fit. But I want to make sure that we're respectful of your business and your brand. So as we maneuver from your perspective, you don't have to ask the question, but you may. It may go a long way. Is there anything from your perspective that we should or should not do? And the reason why that's so important to ask is because you're giving them an opportunity to buy in and be a part of what you're doing by first starting with you as an executive leader or a team leader for that brand. Because if you're someone that people feel that they can talk to, opportunities and things can get done. That's the whole thing. But if people are not willing to talk to you based upon their decision or what they've heard, it's going to make what you're looking to do a lot more challenging, if that makes sense. So, especially when it comes to organizing and being an activist, again, I'm not saying that this is what you have to do and be quiet and fold to what everybody's saying. No, what I'm saying is that at this point, you all are professionals as well. And really, in this larger game of true movers and shakers, as a professional, you are expected to conduct yourself as such, a professional, not only for these sectors to see, but also for those that are studying or dreaming of being in a position of where you are. Because where you are and who you are plays a huge role in how these sectors work with you or someone like you in the future. You're representing more than yourself, if that makes sense. And so if there's ever a challenge that you're going through, as far as, with these sectors, and you're really not that kind of person that has patience, and you're not that person that has kindness, and you have your idea of diplomacy and privacy, I would advocate for you to find someone that through salary or paying them, or someone that can volunteer to be your attorney. Now, if they're going to be your attorney, make sure they're actual attorney or licensed. If they're not licensed anymore, you can still use them for advice, but obviously they couldn't practice through you because they're not a legal attorney. But if they have insight and experience, a paralegal or something like that, that does help. But the bottom line is you're just looking for a spokesperson or a public relations specialist that can speak on your behalf to make sure that at least in the public eye, you have a strong public image, because you really don't want any challenges and you really want to hold yourself blameless. That's easier said than done, but that's how you become successful in the long term. And so we'll leave it there for now. Thank you for leaving in the comments. If you have any questions about these areas of what I discussed, leave them in the comments. Thank you for those comments being professional. I'm not always right, and I'll definitely want to make sure we're doing our research based upon the words that I say. But even when it comes to diplomacy with leaving your comments, there's a way you can do that. You know what I mean? So I thank you for leaving your comments, leaving your perspective, but doing it in a way where if others are looking at it, you're not making yourself you're not making yourself look bad. Because even though I might get the sting from your perspective, overall it's you that spoke those words out of your mouth, which if people are judging can get an idea of your character, which may not really be your character. So usually, like I always say, the wisest person in the room is the quietest person in the room, because nobody knows what you're thinking or saying or doing. Nobody knows what you're saying or doing if they can't hear you, or if they don't see you using body language that depicts low character, if that makes sense. So if you have any questions or something we could talk about in detail, leave it in the comments. If you need to connect with me as far as advising, go ahead and click that link as well, and we can schedule a time for a 15-minute, 30-minute, or 1-hour consultation. Thank you for liking, following, subscribing, all the work that we're doing, sharing this work as well. There should be a link in there where if you have a question pertaining to business, community, or government, you can click the link, put your question in the form, and I'll be able to answer that question sometime in the near future. And of course, there should be a link in there where if you felt this message was valuable to you, I thank you in advance for your monetary donation, any amount you felt this message was worth to you, as I am self-employed, running a growing and successful marketing business, which does require not only for me to eat, but more importantly for my team to eat. So dollars are important, respectfully. Again, we talked about blood to the body, cash to the business. And so, and if you're looking to grow your business, develop your business, how to connect with people, how to talk with people, make sure you click that link or shoot me an inbox to make sure we can connect. Thank you so much. This was another thought of the day for insight into insight, and I'll see you on the next show. Peace.